Hi, welcome to another edition of Talk About here on Shaw TV. Thanks for tuning in. Tonight we've got another political guest. We've had Claire Trevena from the NDP, Bob Bray from the BC Conservative Party, and now we have Peter Schwarzhoff from the Federal Liberal Party. Peter, thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you, John. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's going to be interesting. We know you're involved in the Philosophers Cafe, but you're also, you were at the Federal Liberal Convention in Montreal.
I don't make any secret of being a federal Liberal, John.
Well, it's good. Tell us where you're from and how you got to Campbell River.
Oh, well, I've come back to Campbell River. Born in Ocean Falls, pulp mill town, pulp mill family. We moved here in the early days of the mill, very early days. I don't want to admit how old I am, but early days.
That'd be the 50s.
Grew up here and worked in the mill and in the Super Value store to make ends meet and raise a little nest egg to go to university. Went off to UBC, went there for a couple of years. Thought maybe I might like to be a photographer better. Tried that. Finally, Environment Canada gave me an opportunity and I finished up my degree and in meteorology.
In meteorology?
Meteorology. I am a meteorologist.
That's the weather, I think.
It is. It's not about meteors and comets and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So then after that, been basically traveling around with Environment Canada for 30 years.
Wow.
Been on many places and ended up in Vancouver where I retired about 3 years back and came home, retired home.
Wow. Now, the first time I met you, you were hosting a community meeting at the Maritime Heritage Centre on climate, and I gather that that was co-hosted with the city. How did that come about?
Well, the long story, sorry about that, is that the Liberals basically were looking for ways to do outreach. As you know, we've been getting panned lately for not having a platform, for having meat on the bones. Well, we're in the listening mode, and so we've got a number of things that we know are going to be part of the platform. We wanted to find out how people are talking about it now. So we've had a variety of different events that we've had. One in Comox recently on seniors, and with a friend of mine that I'd met in Environment Canada, we've decided we would have one in Campbell River on climate adaptation. So that's what it really was. Now, if you were there, you'll know it was not a partisan event.
No, it was
None of these are.
I was there, and I found it very useful because instead of getting extreme views, we had sort of like realistic views.
There you go. So we're not out there preaching at this point. We're out there listening. Yeah. So we're putting the topics, the various topics, out in front of people and listening to hear what they have to say. Yeah. So that was the town hall.
And then how did you get to Philosophers Cafe? And before you answer, there was a fellow, Mike McIver, that was doing it at the museum before. Well, of course, he's a New Democrat, but it's a Liberal thing. I don't quite get that, but I understand that he gave it up. And was it Ken Blackburn at the museum who suggested maybe you take the Philosophers Cafe on?
Not quite in that order,
okay.
But I had the pleasure of attending a couple of those wonderful events. Michael McIver is fabulous at doing this, and I dearly wish he had continued to do it. Yeah. And it kind of broke my heart when I found out they were not going to continue it. On the other hand, we were looking for these opportunities to put ideas out in front of people. Yeah. So it seemed like everything just sort of lined up. So I spoke with Ken. I asked him for sure, are you not going to do it? Yeah. I asked him, do you think Michael would be the moderator if I picked it up? He said, oh, I don't think Michael would want to continue to do that, especially since you guys are the Liberals and he is strongly nonpartisan. So I said, well, gee, it is a nonpartisan event. And it said, well, just the same. So it came to me. So last November, decided I was going to pull it off. We booked some space in the Sybil Andrews cottage. I picked a topic. Threw it out there to see if anybody would come and have coffee with me.
What was the topic?
First one was on what to do about the Senate.
Oh.
And that was topical at the time. And sure enough, people wanted to talk about it. It was great.
Yeah. Well, it's still topical.
Well, no doubt it'll come around again. It seems to be sort of on the back burner as the RCMP are investigating, but it'll come back.
And then a few weeks ago, you did one on the treatment of veterans. Was there one in between, or was that?
There was one in between. The second one that we held, also at Sybil Andrews, I brought in a colleague of mine who was a high senior bureaucrat with Corrections Alberta. Oh. She spoke on the topic, hard on crime versus smart on crime. And we had 35 people for that one. It was way too many people for that venue.
Right. Now, the one on the veterans was interesting from a number of levels, like the structure of the room, and you did it at the Online Gourmet, which was nice to give you the venue there. But there's a presentation by an expert and then kind of a group discussion. Is that standard?
That's the format that we're using.
Yeah.
Now, Philosophers Cafe is not a new thing. Even Michael didn't invent it. It's been going on for some time in various places.
Yeah.
In fact, Simon Fraser University, through their continuing education program, hosts quite a lot of these through the course of the year at various places.
Yeah.
But the spin that we've got is that the topics should be national in scope, controversial, at least a little bit, and it should be of local interest. And so we democratically choose one. All the people that have ever been to these philosopher cafes are on an email distribution, so they pick the next one. And one of the ones that was lined up to talk about was veterans. There was another one that was supposed to have come earlier that was on how are we going to pay for an aging society? How are we going to pay for pensions and elder care? So, but I hadn't got a speaker for that one.
Yeah.
But I did find quickly a speaker for our support to veterans.
I know that feeling. It's kind of like finding a guest for the show. The order that you intend sometimes has to be adjusted. But what's the future then of the Philosophers Cafe meetings? Have you got another one lined up?
We do. The next one's already been chosen. One of our philosophers that came out to talk about support to the veterans was Quentin Dodd, and I think many of your viewers will know who that is because he's been around a long time. He's spoken a lot about the environment and about the resource sector. Of course, we're living in largely an natural resources economy, and yet most of us, maybe 95% of us, are also worried about the environment. So he's going to talk about sort of the tension between those two things. Yeah. And I'm sure it's going to be controversial, and I think we'll have a lot of people come out to talk about it.
Now, if people want to reach you and get involved in Philosophers Cafe, what's the best way?
Best way, of course, is to email me. You can watch in the paper because the papers have been wonderful, absolutely wonderful at putting in our notices.
And coming events.
Yeah, they've just been excellent. But if they want to get hold of me, it's my favorite opera, Rigoletto, Rigoletto @shaw.ca.
That was going to be my last question in case we needed to fill it. But we're going to talk about the federal Liberals in a sec here. But how did you choose the Rigoletto for your email? Was it a hobby or something?
I personally love to sing, although I can't claim to be an opera singer. That's a shower activity. But I actually have a young son who is just completing his master's in opera performance.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, at UBC.
And he would have been born in Campbell River?
He was born in Halifax. I did mention I've been around.
Okay, so when is that the next Philosophers Cafe?
Right, we're going to have them the second Wednesday of each month. I believe the date is the 14th, although I'd have to double check that. Online Gourmet. Thank you very much, Crystal Arnett, for making that available to us. And it's always going to be 6:30 to 7:30 unless something preempts us.
Actually, it's a good venue for that. Now, how does Philosophers Cafe differ from Elder College, which is another thing that happens here in town?
Well, I happen to actually be giving 3 talks at Elder College.
Oh, really?
That's a classroom situation, at least as I understand it. Now, Quentin actually runs a conversation group at Elder College. I suspect that's not dramatically different. I think he introduced the topic and then they just go at it. So I think it's quite similar in many ways. But not having been to one of those, I can't be sure how close they are.
Well, I've considered having you and them on at the same time. But then when I was aware of your federal Liberal connections, but with the timing of the convention and all that, I think actually I would be happy to talk to you about federal politics for 28 minutes.
I'd be happy to talk for hours, John.
I wonder if our viewers would. Well, is there anything about Philosophers Cafe you want to revisit before we pass it off?
Just that it's great. We've kind of reached the size we need to be. If we get bigger, we're going to have to think about another group. Maybe come up with something a little different, a different day. But we've already it's really good right now. And I'm just so thrilled that all of these interesting people will come out and talk.
And the parking is excellent there at that time of day, too.
Great.
Now, the convention of the Federal Liberal Party was in Montreal. And some of the reportage that came out about it was that there was very little French spoken. Only about 10% of the delegates were from Quebec. Is that accurate? And if so, what's going on?
I'm not actually privy to the numbers of people that came from Quebec. I met many people from Quebec.
So maybe it was 15 or 20.
I don't know the answer, but roughly 20% of the population of Canada is French speaking, and I would suggest 20% of the venue was, the convention was done in French. But there was simultaneous translation for anyone there. And so many of our speakers spoke in French, and you could hear it in English and vice versa.
Yeah. Well, that's a bit of a difference because I know enough about the Federal Liberal Party that it would be 50% French speaking and then 50% English speaking. And to hear that it's actually like 20/80, which reflects the reality of Canada, I'd say that's progress.
Oh, well, very interesting. That said, we celebrate multiculturalism, and we certainly respect the two founding nations. You know, I personally, my aspiration is to become fluent in French. I have nothing more than high school French now, but I really enjoyed hearing French and being in Montreal. And earlier, I have to say, I enjoyed Carnival in Quebec City, which was a hoot. Really had a good time there. And
Bonhomme.
Yes.
So I think we can talk a lot about the policies that were debated there, though the analysis was that there weren't many. But how did you feel going in and how did you feel going out?
We've been riding a wave of optimism. We had a real down point after the last election. It looked like we were we had been decimated. It looked like we might even be hard to survive as a party. We were talking at that time about possible mergers with the NDP and being the junior partner in that relationship. Well, I'll tell you, ever since the leadership race that we had with Justin Trudeau and the others, it's been nothing but looking up. My own membership has gone from a low at that time to more than doubled it. Well, far beyond doubled it, more like tripled it. We've got an entire new class of people called supporters.
When you say
huge.
Your membership, you're meaning like in this riding?
I mean in this riding.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been unbelievable. People are coming out. I wear my Justin Trudeau button walking down the street, and every day somebody comes up and wants to talk about Justin and the party.
I made him take the button off before we went to air.
It's just a picture of his face, and everybody knows who it is.
Yeah. Well, were you the federal candidate here before? I don't think so.
No, I've never run for office. In fact, I mentioned 30 years with Environment Canada. I haven't been active in politics until I retired.
Huh. So why did you choose the federal Liberals?
Oh, it's the right fit for me. I'm a pragmatist at heart. And actually, if you started talking to me about economics, you'd think I was a conservative. If you talked to me about social justice or the environment, you might think I was NDP or Green. I'm in the center. I'm not any of those. I'm not right or left. I'm just, you know, it's just the right pragmatic fit for me.
So an obvious question, everybody's thinking, angling, are you going to run? Are you going to be a candidate?
The party president, the riding president cannot canvass. It would be a terrible conflict of interest.
Oh, but you could resign as president and then go for the nomination.
If I was to decide to seek the candidacy, I would have to resign. That's correct.
Yeah, but have you given it thought?
I've been asked.
Yeah, because I don't know the town as well as I'd like. I've been in and out for a long time, but I don't know. Maybe one of the councillors would run Liberal. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. None of them have approached me, and I got to admit, I haven't approached them yet. But I can tell you, we've had 3 very strong people come forward, expressed interest. So at this point, they're going through the paperwork process and what we call the green light process. And after they've completed that and the party can see that there are credible candidates, then they'll be able to announce their intentions.
Yeah, and the federal election is 2015?
That's correct, in October.
So there's lots of time.
There's lots of time for people who aren't trying to get all their ducks lined up. It seems like it's really close to us.
Yeah, that's true too. You have a lot of preparation. How are you doing for raising money?
We're unbelievable. We have had the Liberal Party of Canada has had its best year ever. We've outraised the NDP, and we came close to the Conservative for the year, and we in fact outraised them for the last quarter. So people are wanting to make a change, and they're willing to put their time and their money to make it happen.
Okay, here's the million-dollar question. How much of that is due to Justin Trudeau, the person? How much of it is like the Liberal Party, kind of middle, everybody can stand them kind of a thing, except sometimes? And how much of it is antipathy to the Conservatives?
That's fair to say. Now, of course, I haven't actually checked to see if their fundraising has dropped off. I've been told that the numbers of people contributing to the Conservative Party of Canada has dropped. I don't know if their actual dollar value has fallen away. That may be so, and it may be that some of it has come to the Liberals' direction. There's no question that Justin Trudeau is the galvanizing factor. You know, people see in him something different. Some people have said he's too young. He's 41. Some people say that, you know, he doesn't have enough gravitas. Well, maybe not. You know, he is young. He hasn't been in politics a long time, although he's got a great pedigree. But man, he's getting some really smart people around him. So maybe they will lend that.
From my own feeling, I think he earned all the gravitas he needed when he beat Brazeau at boxing. You know, you laugh, but he did that with smarts. You know, he outboxed him strategically, and he was taught by his father to box. I don't know if many people know that.
It's a hobby today. He stays at it. He's incredibly fit, and people have consistently underestimated the man. They did on that occasion, and they've done in many occasions.
But you know, he does look good. That's undeniable. And he's improved his haircut apparently, and you know, he's got a good tailor. But what about his substance? What do you think of his substance?
Well, of course, he's not prepared to put it all out on the table. As soon as you do that, it can be attacked. But he's not without it. The main thing he's been trying to show Canadians right now is his values and the things that he thinks are important. So a substance thing, well, the economy is about as substantial as you can get, and the energy is central to the economy of Canada. So he's gone to the United States and expressed his support for Keystone XL. That's pretty impressive. He's gone to Calgary and talked to the oil industry and expressed his support to getting oil to market.
His father went to Calgary and said, "It'll be a nice city when it's finished." It was an insult.
His father was not known for tact. Justin seems to have some of that, his mother in him in that regard. So he's already laid directions. So and he's been supportive of trade policy. So he knows we're a trading nation. He knows the biggest thing we have to trade are our natural resources. He's going to double down on those things. Part of the problem the Conservatives have had is that in order to get everything out of the way of energy development, they have basically pushed all environmental controls out of the way.
You'd know something about that.
I would know something about that. It's what's gotten me into politics, is what they've done to environmental assessments in Canada. So that's kind of what's gotten me a burr under my bonnet. But that said, so they've pushed these environmental safeguards out of the way to ramp up our energy economy, which is half good and half bad. But it turns out that they've, by damaging our international reputation around the environment, they've also damaged our market. We've got people now that won't buy from Canada because of our environmental policies. That was just dumb.
Well, you know, I think Justin has something his father didn't have. And though his father had both an English and French background, he was raised in Quebec. Now, I'm not sure where Justin was born, probably Montreal. But, you know, Margaret Sinclair, his mother, is from West Vancouver, my old stomping grounds, when I was in school. And her father was a, shall we call him an oligarch? But no, he was a senator, and he was a rainmaker. He was a kingpin of British Columbia politics. So, and then Justin, well, he went to UBC for a while, I think. I'm not sure, but anyway, he taught in Point Grey area for quite a while, and I think he was up at Whistler or something like that. But he understands British Columbia from having lived here, and you know, maybe if the federal Liberal Party was to get somebody who is elected in Montreal, I can't remember his name. I don't think it's Notre Dame. It's next door, isn't it, or something? Papineau. But yet still understands the West, that could be a pretty good mix.
Justin calls BC his second home.
Yeah.
He's consistently come here to visit. He's promised to visit every riding, and someday we'll see him in Campbell River. When he was seeking the leadership of the party, he got a motorhome and traveled to every little nook and cranny. I got to admit, it was a bit of a personal adventure with he and his family. They really enjoyed just simply hanging out as a family in the motorhome.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I think you're right. He does care about what happens in British Columbia.
Yeah, yeah. So what were some of the policy highlights out of the Liberal Party of Canada convention in Montreal?
Well, John, despite the fact we're accused of not having policy, these are the policies we debated in Montreal.
But some of them weren't debated. They were voted on without debate.
They were all gone through a process to get that far.
That's true.
And then in the workshops that you didn't see televised, we debated them. And so that's where we looked at the wording and the direction they're going and how much would these things cost. If it turns out we didn't like them that much, they didn't get priorized. If we really liked them, they got priorized. And that's what this is.
Oh,
that's the list of the priority ones that went forward to the plenary, and those are the ones you saw us vote on with very little dissent, because it had already been through those earlier stages. There was a couple, though, that were controversial and did generate some discussion. Some of them are very sensitive. One of the policies that we put forward and has been adopted is the decriminalization of assisted suicide by medical professionals. We're calling it dying with dignity. Now, we've proposed that there be a number of safeguards to make sure it's not abused, but that now, after a lot of debate, has been adopted as Liberal policy.
And does Justin adhere to that, or?
Well, it's Liberal Party policy. What actually shows up in the platform is of his choosing.
Yes.
So you will see that the Liberals support that policy now. That's done. Whether Justin Trudeau chooses to make it part of his platform, we shall see.
Now, you mentioned decriminalization. Justin, when he was starting out, was pretty strong on decriminalizing marijuana.
Yes.
Did that make it through the convention?
That was done previously. That's been a party policy now for a while.
Actually, decades, I believe, and they promise it but never do it.
We haven't done it, it's true. And one of the reasons, I believe, although I was not in politics at the time, was concern of the reaction at the border by the United States. It might basically cause trade to stop as we were trying to move trucks across the border. I'd heard that at least. That no longer seems to be a problem, given that several states have already decriminalized marijuana.
Yeah. Okay, any other policies you want to hit on?
Well, there's been one area of policy making. It actually was a number of policies that I think are really important to this region, and that had to do with renewing our relationship with Aboriginals. There was, I'm pleased to say too, that a prominent Aboriginal from Cape Mudge, Jody Wilson-Raybould, was the co-chair of that convention. She has, and the Aboriginal Committee have put together a whole bunch of very sound policy resolutions. Almost all of them were adopted, but key ones included turning our back on the white paper, I believe it was in 1969, and I probably have the date wrong. So that was a key one. Basically, we're admitting to a whole bunch of mistakes that the Liberal Party has made in the past, and we want to rectify them. We're showing the Aboriginal people that we know we've made mistakes. Let's talk to you about how we can correct them. And some other ones, like for instance, we also are supporting an inquiry into the missing Aboriginal women, and we want to get on with that. And there's a number of other ones that around equitable education and a number of just injustices that are still occurring.
Now, the Colonial Accord was a big issue shortly before Gordon Campbell got elected premier. And I think the feds kind of pushed it as a political ploy, and I'm not sure why Campbell signed, but Campbell revoked it, I think. Is that how it worked? Do you remember?
It died when the Harper government took power and pushed it off the table.
Okay,
so at that we had all of the provinces and territories and leaders from Aboriginal groups all came to a conclusion on how to move forward. And had Paul Martin not lost in that next election, it would have been policy, would have been law. Sadly, we had to hit the reset.
Well, I'm of an age where my memory is not as good as it used to be. I don't remember the details of the accord, but I do remember at the time thinking, well, it's pretty seriously flawed. Maybe it's a good thing.
If there were flaws, those would have been dealt with through committee and so on, but never got that
So
far.
the players were happy with it.
They were, and that's miraculous that you could get all of those people together to agree on that document.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, John, if you'll let me, I'll actually refer to another one that kind of fell off the table. Now, the Liberal Party has often been talking about, or saying we talk the talk on climate change but never did anything. That's a mantra that's been sung by the the Conservative Party for years and years. I would like to argue that that is not the case. In fact, we had spent a significant amount of time trying to bring all the provinces to the table. And maybe you're aware that an awful lot of negotiations has to go on under the table before it can ever be put on the table. That work was hard, and it was done. David Anderson had really worked hard to bring all the provinces to the table, and we were almost there. And again, it's another one that died when the Liberal Party died.
So we've only got a couple minutes left. Dare I mention climate change?
Well, I would love it, because many years ago I had one early town hall meeting when I was a meteorologist in Kelowna. I pulled together one. So climate change has been on my radar for a very long time.
Or as I would call it, climate variation.
Well, there is variation in climate. There's been huge variations in climate. We've been hotter than this, and we've been vastly colder than this. What's different, of course, is the rate at which the temperature is changing, and the unequivocal cause of this particular changing. So,
unequivocal cause being humans?
Absolutely.
I disagree.
I'll arm wrestle you for it.
Well,
I'll bring my 97% of climate scientists to bear on the issue.
Sounds like a Philosophers Cafe event.
We should do it.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how fast the time goes, Peter. But thank you very much for coming in. My guest has been Peter Schwarzhoff. He's doing the Philosophers Cafe stuff. You can get him at Rigoletto at
Shaw.ca.
I've heard of Shaw. And we also talked about the Federal Liberal Party, and that's going to be an interesting story to follow too. So thank you, volunteers. Thank you, Gord, in the control room, and thank you, Shaw, for putting on Talk About here on Shaw TV. Tell a friend. We're on YouTube as well. You can find us there. And there's some links on my own website, www.crnv.com as well. So thanks for watching, and see you again.